Welcome to today's webinar. As a global consulting firm, Protiviti is here to help you connect, grow, succeed. We invite you to visit us online at protiviti.com/webinars to find other great content and subscribe. Now, let's begin.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for our webinar discussing Modernizing Identity Management for SAP with Microsoft Entra ID. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Audio will be streamed through your computer. We recommend using Edge or Google Chrome as your web browser. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webcast, please let us know via the Q&A window. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation today via the Q&A window. We will address as many questions as possible after the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. The recording link along with the presentation slides will be emailed to you after the webinar. Also, in your webinar console, you'll see a thumbs up icon in the bottom right. With this, you can interact with us today during the presentation by liking a slide or a point that one of our presenters makes. For those of you who are not familiar with Protiviti, we are a global consulting firm that provides deep expertise and a tailored approach to help leaders confidently face the future. We provide consulting and managed services to our clients around the world. Protiviti is also a Microsoft AI Cloud Solutions partner with a global team of certified experts and Microsoft MVPs. We provide award-winning innovative solutions with expertise in all Microsoft technologies. Specifically for today's topic, it was recently announced that we are an exclusive services and integration partner for deploying Microsoft Entra with SAP applications. For more information around that announcement, please check out the article in the resources window. We are also a Gold SAP Solutions partner and a 7-time Partner of the Year. We provide digital transformation and intelligent automation solutions across business processes, analytics, cloud, security, compliance, and managed services. We have a great panel of presenters here with us today. Joe Markham is the Managing Director at Protiviti, helping clients with identifying opportunities to enable their business processes through cybersecurity program enhancement. Brian Jordan is an Associate Director at Protiviti with over 10 years of experience executing and managing various SAP projects in the identity and access management space. Sarah Donnellan is an identity governance expert with experience in Active Directory and Entra ID assessments, domain migrations and consolidations, and tool rationalization. I am Julia Marple, and I will be moderating today's session. We have a packed agenda today where we will discuss the significance of identity management and governance, the challenges of identity management within the SAP System Landscape, Microsoft Entra ID and its capabilities, and the benefits of integrating your SAP System Landscape with Entra ID. Now I'll turn it over to Joe to discuss the importance of identity management and governance.
Thanks, Julia. So we thought it'd be important to start by setting the background to why we're talking today. When we look at cybersecurity today, and we look at things like the IBM 2022 Data Breach Report, they found that even with all of our advances in cybersecurity tools, capabilities, and spending, the average time to identify a data breach was 243 days, and it took an additional 84 days to contain and recover from the breach. While there are many drivers for this, one of the primary points is that the cause of a breach is often related to an identity attack. But the study showed that we can reduce detection and response time by up to 1/3 through use of automation, a significant improvement that can reduce the overall cost of the organization, in some cases by millions of dollars. And today, we are looking to apply automation throughout the cyber kill chain. Our teams and practitioners simply are not fast enough to manage, detect, and response from adversaries without leveraging automation. And this is where leveraging an identity and access management tool and the automation that it brings can significantly reduce the risk of identity attacks. Identity is really the new security perimeter. We all work in hybrid environments where we require access to systems and data from anywhere and often from different platforms, including laptops and mobile devices, which push the enterprise perimeter to essentially everywhere. Because of these business requirements, the old castle and moat approach to security doesn't really work, which puts increased focus on secure identity and access management to enable the business while ensuring security and compliance. To do this, we need technologies that are both cloud native and support our legacy applications that might only sit on premises. As such, we see mature identity and access management not just as a security requirement, but also as a critical business enabler. Organizations today are looking to modernize and improve their identity programs. We have a lot of clients looking to implement automation of user provisioning for birthright entitlements. They want integration with their HR system of record, like Workday and SuccessFactors, to automate user onboarding and support join, remove, or leaver events for access to M365 applications, email, and their other enterprise applications. They want to integrate more enterprise applications for role-based provisioning, and they're looking to leverage solutions like Microsoft Entra ID governance to support that goal. At Protiviti, we understand native integration, business rules and authentication, and compliance requirements, and support our clients with those goals. We implement these capabilities for clients today. We integrate client on-prem AD, Entra ID, and HR systems for automation that increases efficiency, meets their compliance requirements, and supports improved security. Clients also want to streamline their identity solutions by replacing multiple authentication providers and improve user experiences with single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. And when an organization is looking to implement a new ERP solution, that's a great time to think about leveraging modern identity and access management solutions that enable risk management, improve financial effectiveness by reducing administration costs, provide a competitive advantage by increasing employee productivity, and meet your regulatory compliance requirements for things like SOX, HIPAA, and PCI. So with that, Julie, I think we have our first polling question.
Yep. So our first polling question is, where is your organization in your identity access management journey? We have fully implemented a solution. We are working on implementing a solution. It is in our plan, not started yet or still researching options. So Joe, when you're talking with your clients, where are they typically in their journey when they come to us for help?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we see a spectrum of maturity ranging from implementing basic identity lifecycle management focused on automating, for example, the joiner event, right? So having that integration with an HR system of record to just at least enable automation and efficiency for new user access or for leaver events when a user leaves the organization, ensuring that their access has been reduced. As they increase in maturity, they look to do basic segregation of duty, automation, and automating user recertification processes. And so a lot of clients are moving to that today. Our more mature clients are focused on driving a converged state of identity management across applications so that you can have a single source of identity management and risk management, which can include both fine-grained access control and cross-application segregation of duty. And so that's where most clients are trying to move to today.
All right, great. So let's see where our audience is. Okay, we're kind of split at the top.
That's good. Yep, looks like we've got some folks that have a great, maybe a good solution in place today, and others that are working to put something in place, including a plan for how to address identity and access management. That's great.
Yep, awesome. Now we'll turn it over to Brian.
Awesome, thanks, Julia. So I kind of want to talk about SAP specifically and how IAM and SAP go together. So as a consultant with many different clients, I've begged for access a lot, and I've seen a lot of different models across my clients, different maturity too. You know, as we've seen from the polls, there are situations where, you know, it's just email, and there are situations where they know exactly what I need. But before I get into the system, there's definitely at least a little bit of back and forth on the SAP access. So oftentimes I see my Teams and email get set up right away, and then it's another week or two before I get into SAP. And I think there are a number of factors that influence this, but these are kind of 5 that I've seen across a lot of my clients. And I do want to note that often I see the SAP access being handled by a separate team And I think that that just kind of speaks to how SAP can be a challenging system to provision and manage access to. So kind of going down this list, I think one of the first ones is just the general complexity of the SAP landscape. There are a lot of unique user identity requirements. Of course, it's been around for a long time. There are a lot of different types of systems that do different things. But it's just it's a very complex landscape, and there's a lot of variation between systems, between organizations, and so just understanding how an individual organization's SAP landscape looks is a challenge in its own. One of the second things is just the decentralized management of security. So with all these different systems, there isn't really a single place to manage things like password policies or policies around logon location, timing, that type of thing. And so knowing what parameter you need to set and which system and where you do it is something that's very tough, especially when you maybe for audit need to look at these things yearly. Trying to remember and document all that can be a tough thing. I also see inconsistent identity data. A lot of these systems have been around for decades, and so you see kind of different ages of identity data. Also see different usernames. It might be an email in one system. It might be a B Jordan type thing in another system, and tying all those identities together and understanding them is difficult. And then when you start thinking about that join, remove, or leaver process and trying to make sure that all these things get updated in every system every time there's an event is very tough. There's also a lot of strict compliance requirements that go along with some of these SAP systems. I mean, obviously, when we think about the core ERP like ECC and S4, these are business critical systems. And so that puts them in scope of a lot of regulations that are going to require tracking and auditing. So it's really important to understand who can do what and sometimes who has done what in these systems. And so knowing that, is another component that makes IAM difficult for SAP. Finally, there's the administrative overhead. So when we think about all these different systems, we also have production, quality, dev. Sometimes doing these different IAM processes, whether it's provisioning, resetting passwords, whatever it is, places a significant burden on that IT staff. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's the SAP team that manages a lot of these different things. And so, it can quickly become a full-time job for that specific team to do these administrative tasks. And it doesn't leave a lot of time to, think about these processes as a whole and how we might improve upon them. So two other kind of components are the SAP, like SAP role management and access risk monitoring. I think that these go hand in hand with the previous 5 factors that I mentioned. But I think there's a vicious cycle here where these two topics kind of influence each other and make it more difficult and more critical because you're trying to split your attention and between these two things. So I think acknowledging that role management and access risk in SAP is very difficult. Is an important thing to think about. Even without these IAM challenges, when we think about just building a role and assigning it to a user in an SAP system, that's often very tough. One of the things that we love about SAP is how configurable and customizable it is, but a lot of times these options impact security. So understanding what custom functionality there is or what configuration options we've chosen can influence these things. We have a large user base. We have changing business requirements, very granular end user security model. So, in an S4 system, there are 50,000 options in the field values that you could give to certain users, and users need tons of these. And so just understanding that and organizing it is very tough. There's also a very tall hierarchy structure. When we think about the actual end user access that you get, we might go from a user to a business role to a composite role, derived role, auth objects, field values, et cetera. And so a change anywhere along this chain can impact things both upstream and downstream. So trying to get, wrap your head around that can be tough. Finally, the access risk are also very difficult to monitor. So thinking about that segregation of duty, sensitive access, it's tough because of these other things that I've already mentioned. It's there's a lot that goes into it. And I think you really need to have SAP specific risk analysis engine. You need to have a custom rule set to kind of understand a lot of these things. The final portion of this is once you figure out that there is an access risk, what do you do about it? Well, you kind of go back to that role management thing and figure out, okay, if we change something here, how is that going to impact everyone? And then how do we end up provisioning that out to the users? So shifting gears a little bit, I think, looking at these challenges, it's important to understand what tooling there is out there. So what I'm showing is SAP's identity and access management product portfolio. So on the left, we do have identity of customer, but really today we're kind of focusing on the identity of an enterprise user. This is kind of broken out between the public cloud solutions in this top box, and then the on-premise or private cloud products in the bottom box. And then the three pillars are authentication, identity lifecycle, and authorization. So when we think about this, authentication is essentially, ensuring that users are who they claim to be when they're logging in. And there are, a few different options there. We have the identity lifecycle products, and this is about, the user identities within a system from creation to deletion, and also that kind of business role, birthright access idea. And then finally, authorization, which is that really fine-grained, what actions can users perform in a system. So I want to kind of take special note of the products that are in this SAP Cloud Identity Services box, because we'll kind of be coming back to that later, as well as IAG in the top right here. You can see in the bottom middle, SAP Identity Management, or IDM, and that's, one of the catalysts for this webinar is the fact that this is, going end of life in 2027, and Entra ID has kind of been positioned to be that replacement. And although it's under the lifecycle umbrella, Entra ID also has a lot of great features in the authentication and authorization side. And there's some integration options with the products, the SAP products on either side there. So just again, IDM is kind of maintenance is ending for it December 31st, 2027, and extended maintenance is going to go through 2030. But whether you use IDM or another IAM tool, or you don't even have one yet, Entra ID does cover a lot of these scenarios that SAP customers need, and the reason that they leverage these IAM products. So I'll turn it over to Julia for a polling question, and then Sarah can cover how Entra ID helps with these scenarios and more.
Great. Our next polling question is, how long does it take for a new user to obtain the access to your SAP systems? Is an SOD check occurring during access provisioning? There are several different answers here, so you may have to scroll down to see all of the options. But Brian, what have you been seeing with your clients? What are your clients saying about how long it takes them to get a new user to obtain access?
Yeah, I probably should have put the right access in here, because I think that's also a portion of it is, you get the access and find out you either have too much or too little, but it's all over the place, and it's reflective, I think, of the investment that's been put in here. It's easy to give a lot of access. It's hard to give the right access. So I think it usually reflects what sort of investment or time they've put into this, but it's all over the board.
All right, we'll give a couple more seconds to get your answers in before we check out the results of the audience today. All right, and let's see. Yeah,
so a lot right in the middle here.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to the type of people that attend a webinar to learn more about this stuff, is that, there is some attention here, and, we do want to do the SOD check, and days is a good number. I think sometimes you can get that number down for some of our high volume type users if you have a lot of a certain type of user, but that's great.
Awesome. All right, now Sarah will talk about Microsoft Entra ID.
Yes, thank you so much. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Dinellin. I support the Microsoft Identity Services team here at Protiviti, and we'll talk about Entra in just a minute, but I wanted to get started here first with Protiviti's IAM framework. So Protiviti has an end-to-end comprehensive model for effectively deploying Microsoft capabilities to meet identity and access management needs across many types of identities, such as human, non-human, contractors, vendors, devices. So we're going to focus on today will be this top middle box area, the IGA box and provisioning systems. But this diagram is meant to represent where that sits in the larger IAM framework. And it highlights which Microsoft capabilities are responsible for each component of that framework. So what exists between your inputs that you see on the left here and the resources that are over to the right, being your data, your infrastructure, your endpoints, your SaaS apps, is Microsoft Entra. And Microsoft Entra is the unifying brand for Microsoft's portfolio of products that combine identity and access management, cloud infrastructure management, and identity verification. And a main component of Entra is Entra ID, which is formerly known as Azure AD, and that's Microsoft's cloud-based IAM service for managing and protecting your users, your apps, your workloads, your devices. However, under that umbrella of IAM, there are additional products than just Entra ID. So I'm going to touch on those in a moment, but I just wanted to call out how those work in tandem to safeguard connection between your people, your resources, your applications, your devices. So the Entra product family can be split into these three sections. The first being the identity access management, and then the new identity categories, and then over to the right, your network access. And within IAM, very briefly, as I mentioned, we have Entra ID, most notably remembered as Azure AD, which is used to manage your products, your users, your apps, your workloads. We also have Entra External ID, which provides secure access to your applications. We have Entra Domain Services for managing domain controllers in the cloud. And then where we're going to spend some more time is Entra Identity Governance, which is used to protect, to monitor, and to audit your access to your critical assets in your environment. So Microsoft Identity Governance can do things like support the access lifecycle. We can create and manage access certifications, access recertifications. We can create access reviews. We can define if they should be completed by employees themselves, their managers, resource owners, depending on the business need. And these offer really rich insights. We can extend this with richer insights using machine learning-based recommendations, things like user-to-group affiliation and stale account monitoring. We can support the privilege access lifecycle and do that through just-in-time access with PIM-enabled groups, as well as the ability to schedule workflows to grant access to privileged Azure groups and roles, and then take them away when that access is no longer required. We also support the identity lifecycle. And identity governance is able to do this from the beginning, from inbound user provisioning from HR systems like SuccessFactors and Workday out of the box. But we can also do the same with other sources, such as like UltiPro, for example, with custom configuration that syncs your users either directly into your tenant to create a cloud-only identity, or we can sync down on-prem and synchronize up with the synchronization tool to create hybrid identities for users that still need access to applications that are hosted on-prem. And once those users are in your Entra tenant, we can do things like configure lifecycle workflow events. You can see here that, so when Entra is able to connect to that HR source, we have the ability to pull the employee's hire date and their leave date and use those for setting tasks. So for example, we can define a pre-hire workflow to run 5 days before an employee's first day of work. And we can define the tasks that we want it to execute at that time. There's numerous tasks available out of box. For example, we can add users to groups or teams. We can send emails, but there's also a lot of opportunity to leverage custom logic apps within these workflows that can be triggered as a result of the lifecycle. And these logic apps are available at multiple other points throughout identity governance, throughout the whole blade, but they provide the ability to extend the functionality of the tasks beyond what's just provided out of box to best fit your business's needs. So in this pre-hire example, a way that we can use this logic app would be to generate a ServiceNow ticket on the employee's behalf and send the employee their new laptop with the user data that was provided from the HR system that's connected as a source of truth to Entra. We can also define these workflows to run the days leading up to, on, or after an employee's last day for activities like removing licenses, forwarding mailboxes, and disabling accounts. So we can also configure mover life cycles that you see in the middle there. And we can also define those actions to take place on things like a user's attributes changing. For example, maybe they have a new job title, they transfer departments, they move to a new location. And these mover workflows can be pretty useful when they're configured properly. They also help your organization abide by least privilege. To touch briefly on entitlement management here and the access lifecycle, Entra is a source that connects to various applications, from your enterprise SaaS apps to legacy on-prem applications and custom applications we can connect to using SCIM or LDAP. And this allows Microsoft to manage entitlements across all applications and organize that access based on a variety of attributes. So we can organize that access to particular applications based on employee's location, that employee's department, their job role, and we can provision that access accordingly automatically. And depending on the configuration of the target system and your business requirements, users also have the ability to request the access that they need. So if not granted through strategic group membership already, those users can go into the portal and say, I need access to this application. And here at Protiviti, we support a lot of our customers with creating that best strategy for managing user access that aligns with Microsoft's functionality. The access lifecycle management is made possible through a few methods, depending on what you're looking to connect to. You can see in this diagram here, one option is through group membership. So when users are read into Entra from an HR source of truth, such as SuccessFactors, either through dynamic or direct assignment to a group, they're provisioned access to the systems that they need and then seamlessly removed when that access is no longer required. And these groups allow for efficient and automatic group management that lessens human error and downtime for getting the right people the access that they need in a timely manner. Now, Entra Identity Governance allows you to configure access reviews on that group membership with useful insights, as I mentioned earlier, such as inactive user indications, user to group affiliation, and we can also reduce the risk of over-provisioning with SOD and conditional access policies here. Another similar method for provisioning would be through access packages, where a collection of groups, application roles, or just access to applications can be gathered and either granted to users automatically. That access package can be directly assigned to users in like birthright scenarios, or can be requestable by users through that My Access portal. And so to consider this from the SAP point of view, the guidance from Microsoft is to represent business roles with access packages and to represent privilege or technical roles through group membership. And we can do that a bit more by creating something called an app role in Entra that is tied to the role in your target system. And then through configuration and identity governance, we're able to determine how users should get access to that app role. So there's a couple examples here. One would be by tying that app role to a group that users are dynamically granted access to based on a particular attribute, such as their job title, their call center, something along those lines. Another example with group membership would be by directly assigning users to a group, so not based off an attribute. But in that instance, maybe we're going to put more frequent, more thorough access recertifications and access reviews on that group. So maybe it's a more privileged scenario. Or like I mentioned earlier, on the other end of that, another option would be to make that role requestable by users through the My Access portal. And I can go on, but the point is that depending on your business's requirements, Entra Identity Governance can support your organization's access lifecycle in a secure and an efficient way. So I'm going to turn this back over to Brian to tell us a little bit more about how SAP can be supported with Entra Identity Governance.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to focus first on two SAP products, as they're actually a key part of the architecture that Microsoft and SAP are recommending through this partnership. So one cool thing too is this cloud identity services product. You might already own it and not know it. Um, it's provided as part of a bundle with a lot of SAP cloud applications. Um, since some of the cloud applications that SAP sells don't have a standalone authentication functionality or user stores, CIS is actually delivered with these applications in order to to be able to log in and to assign roles and create users. So it's really just by itself a key component to other SAP cloud products. And for that reason, any customer that's using an SAP cloud product today may already have a bundled tenant of CIS because it's given for free in order to support these cloud solutions. So there are really kind of three things that go into cloud identity services. And these used to be separate services, and over the past couple of years, they've kind of been bundled under this SAP Cloud Identity Services, header. The first being identity authentication, and this is really the service that handles authentication and single sign-on, but it also has the ability to delegate to other providers. So, when we think about Entra, it might be that we use IAS to delegate to Entra. There's also the provisioning service, and this is used to actually send user identities and authorizations to the various SAP systems. So CIS has pre-built connectors and attribute mappings for over 30 SAP cloud and on-premise systems. So this really helps when you're trying to connect a new system. You already have, username in this system mapped to username in the CIS central component. So it really helps reduce the knowledge that you need to know on these downstream systems and how their user identity attributes work. There's also the identity directory that allows for persistence of users and groups inside of CIS. So this helps and is required for other applications, but it's another key component. There's also SAP Identity and Access Governance, and this is essentially what gives kind of those premium compliance features like cloud-based fine-grained access risk analysis. So if you're trying to figure out what users have SOD and sensitive access, you would use IAG on top of that, and also helps with business role management and some of the privileged access management workflows and reporting that you might want. So, again, next time you log into SAP Concur or Fieldglass, CIS is really probably what's helping do that, even if you're seeing a different style login page. So I cover those to say, really the kind of message here is that Entra ID and SAP CIS are better together. Many organizations probably already own both as well. I'm sure a lot of people are Microsoft based, and so you have some component of Entra, and extending that, is a very natural thing. And again, if you have an SAP cloud product, you probably already own SAP CIS, but maybe it's just a configuration and additional functionality that you need to enable and use. So integrating both of these and using both is very natural if you're already in these environments. And the thing is that they really complement each other very well. So if we look at kind of this landscape diagram here on the left, Entra ID only needs to be connected to SAP CIS, and then CIS serves as a gateway to the rest of the SAP landscape. So you kind of set up that one connection, and then CIS can connect to all of your downstream SAP systems. So just being able to leverage that one connection, means that you can kind of focus on mapping the attributes and various things between Entra and CIS. And then CIS has all those pre-built connectors for the different attribute mappings to the downstream system. So it really reduces, the time to value when you're trying to connect a new system. So establishing that first connection between Entra ID and CIS becomes a huge win, because then it's very easy to extend to additional systems. So using these together is essentially the recommended architecture, because Entra brings a lot of great features like conditional access, all the multi-factor authentication through Microsoft Authenticator, passkeys, et cetera, whereas CIS brings this default SAP focused connectivity. Again, I mentioned how important CIS is just within the SAP landscape to provide a lot of these features to cloud products. So it's something, that SAP has has a focus on in terms of making sure that these things work great just within their own environment, but it also provides this rich connectivity to Entra ID. So, we have this easy integration and we have this IAM consistency. And I think that both of these things really kind of feed back to those 5 SAP IAM challenges that we talked about earlier. It really helps solve a lot of these things. So, again, 1 + 1 kind of equals 3 here. And the strength of the partnership is just its ability to address these challenges, whether it's kind of the decentralized security management or inconsistency of identity data. So if we can combine these two, it's, we have this Entra ID as a robust IAM system, and we have SAP's dedicated cloud identity services, connecting to both its cloud and on-premise environments. We have a powerful tool together that kind of helps manage these identities. And again, it can be across the entire IT ecosystem. So we also have our non-SAP applications that can be connected into Entra ID. And then SAP CIS is that gateway to SAP. So you really can centralize a lot of these IAM functions. And best of all, again, you probably already own both in some form. I'm going to talk about Entra and SAP IAG as well. So again, thinking about some of those more premium compliance features, this is really a lot of stuff that Sarah covered, but just thinking from an SAP perspective about how you might be able to use these things. SAP business roles in these downstream systems can be represented in Entra ID as access packages and requested as access packages. There's also the ability to perform these user access reviews, recertifications in Entra ID for users who are assigned these things. I do also want to note that in the documentation that was released from Microsoft a couple weeks ago, there is a reference they mentioned within that documentation that there's future work that they're going to do on the integration of Entra and IAG. So I'm excited to see what that is. But I think that this is an area where we could see new features and evolution soon based on that comment in the documentation. And I think that plus the existing functionality will really help address some of the role management and access risk monitoring challenges that we see a lot of SAP clients face. So finally, kind of bringing it all together and thinking about a common process that might, what it might used to have looked like and what it might look like just doing some integration between these two systems. Thinking about the new employee process, the joiner process. So if we have someone join our organization and they need, a user account in SAP IBP, which is an SAP cloud system for business planning, before, this is a hugely manual process. So these orange boxes are manual steps. And if we think about, HR is kind of creating a new employee, they might create some sort of ticket and a ticketing system to go over to that SAP team, that SAP administrator to create this user. So some time passes, the admin's probably on vacation, right? They get that ticket, review it for completeness and appropriateness. Maybe there's a follow-up question, but eventually they create that ID in IBP by manually copying over the employee attributes from this ticket. And then some SAP steps that they need to do, they have to download and upload the identity data from IBP into that CIS system that, again, is used for authentication so that user can log into IBP. So that CSV, ends up on their computer maybe, and then is re-uploaded. Finally, at that point, the user can use CIS to, kind of click a button and email an initial password to the user. And then, at that point, that's when the end user can kind of log into SAP using CIS's sign-in page. So if we have Entra ID and we have CIS and we do a little bit of work to integrate these things, let's, say Entra ID is reading from that HR source system, what it can kind of look like after this. And again, the blue boxes are automated steps. HR, again, creates the new employee in the HR system, and that triggers an event to push this new employee to Entra ID. So Entra, then has the identity data of this user. You can have logic in there, again, understanding that this employee is in a certain department where they're going to need SAP IBP. And so it can trigger that user provisioning to SAP IBP based on, let's say, the employee's department. So then Entra will send that data to SAP CIS and, hey, we have a new user. SAP CIS receives that, and it can create the the employee directly in CIS and then send the data to SAP IBP to create that user ID. Finally, the end user at this point really can just log in to IBP directly, and instead of using maybe a CIS sign-in page where they're typing in a separate password, it's using that same Entra ID sign-in page, that we use for our O365 apps and maybe multi-factor authentication as well. So you can see it really jumps you from step one right to the end just by kind of doing that integration. And we can have our role admins assigning the access at some point if we want, but there's also additional automation opportunities here as well when we think about the business roles, that type of thing. So really, when we're looking at this, significant reduction in manual steps, reducing the human error, making sure that our ID naming convention is all followed. Movers and leavers can also be handled by same similar process here, where if there are name changes, if account locks for leave of absence, or someone that leaves the organization, these type of things can happen right away instead of having to go through a lot of these manual steps. I think the authentication is also a really big one. Just having users have that single sign-on experience rather than having a potentially separate SAP IBP password and having to have 2 MFA apps, that type of thing. And again, we're also ready for kind of further enhancement and extension to other systems. So if we have a lot of these connections already created, between Entra ID and CIS, again, we can kind of push the same idea to another downstream SAP system by creating that standard connection between CIS and it, and of course, customizing it as needed. So, I think that's just one really cool thing here, and I think a great scenario because everyone has new employees, and it's definitely a pain sometimes to get them into these cloud systems and can be a really manual effort. So, just one example of how identity management can be modernized by automating these type of processes and really capitalizing on these existing investments into Microsoft and SAP technologies. So some of the key takeaways here. So many clients who use SAP or Microsoft, again, already have access to both of these things, but just aren't fully utilizing the benefits of connecting them. And again, there's been a lot of movement, a lot of momentum on this in the past few months, and so a lot of great new features. SAP is updating CIS all the time, so just within that world, we see a lot of things, and of course, with the partnership and Entra ID, we've been seeing a lot of evolution as well. So they're great products, and there's really just a ton of momentum here. So looking forward to that partnership kind of growing and moving. And finally, just Protiviti again is a very strong partner for both Microsoft and SAP individually. Julia kind of mentioned that earlier, and we do have kind of a deep understanding of a lot of the challenges that our clients are facing in this area. All right, I'll turn it over to Julia for another polling question.
All right, so this is our last polling question. Would your organization be interested in an exclusive demo of Microsoft Entra ID governance with SAP CIS integration? And we'll give you a minute or so to submit your answer here. We did get a few questions around the slides and the recording. The slides and the recording will be sent out to everyone after today's webinar. So you will be getting an email with the recording, the slides, and then a few other resources. Additionally, in those resources, you will see the article that we posted that talks a little bit more around this topic that Microsoft released. Lots of great information there. And of course, Brian, Sarah, and Joe all cover that information today. But if you'd like to read that article, it is in the resources section. All right, let's give a few more seconds here, and then we will move on to the Q&A portion. If you have a question for our presenters, please insert it in the Q&A window. All right, so we did get a few questions in. First question is, can I see an identity governance demo even if I don't have a SAP CIS?
Yep, Julia, I can take that one. Absolutely. So whether you are leveraging SAP CIS today, whether you are leveraging SAP IDM, or maybe you're thinking about moving to integrate or implement SAP in your environment, you don't have the ERP solution in place today, we're happy to provide you with a demonstration of the Entra ID and Entra ID governance capabilities, and we can walk you through how all of that works from our Protiviti lab.
Awesome. Another question we got is, for inbound provisioning to Entra, what if I use multiple HCM tools?
That's a great question. So Entra ID specifically supports multiple HR tools. So whether you're using Workday or SAP SuccessFactors or an HR app like Util Pro or payroll app like ADP or even a spreadsheet in Google, Entra ID can support all of those systems of record, and it can support multiple concurrent systems so that you can bring in those data points and you can leverage that to support your join, remove, or leave events. In addition to that, we see a lot of clients ask about the ability to do data transformations when they're working with multiple different systems. And Microsoft offers a couple different opportunities to do that. You can leverage something like Azure Data Factory to apply some type of data cleansing if you need to from your HR system, or within Entra ID specifically, if you need to do some attribute mapping transformations, for example, to create a unique user ID within Entra ID. Microsoft offers logic apps built in throughout the environment. And logic apps provide a very powerful way, it's a low-code, no-code opportunity to apply a lot of different automation in the environment that you might be looking for. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and power within the environment.
Awesome. Another question we received, are the pre-built connectors in CIS customizable?
Yeah, I can take that one. They're customizable, and I would say even in most cases, you probably need to do some level of customization. They absolutely, will work as set up, but depending on things like what you use as your primary user identifiers, if you want to bring any custom extended attributes, that type of thing, enhancing that type of data would require some customization, and also kind of depending on your architecture, if you want to bring certain things or not, you would want to do at least a little bit of customization there. But I think the value in them is that it gives you a really good idea of, these are even the attribute names, these are the 20 or 30 most common attribute names that in that destination system. And so, you have to do a little bit of your own configuration to say, okay, we want to put, this email here, et cetera.
Great. Another question we got, are there best practices for when identity authentication service and identity provisioning service are required, recommended, versus a direct connection with Entra ID? We've seen that from some SAP services, you can directly connect SAML and potentially provisioning from Entra ID instead of using IAS, IPS as a middle service. Seems like added complexity that is only sometimes required.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think that's a great question we could take offline because it needs to be tailored to your specific environment. But there are a lot of different mechanisms and opportunities for integration, for application provisioning, whether that's in SAP directly or your other enterprise applications. So certainly happy to take that question offline and explore some of those different options with you.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
The only thing I might add on that is just some of the SAP Cloud products, they only give you like a SCIM endpoint. So, there's a little bit on the SAP side where, certain things are available in certain systems.
All right. Well, thank you, Joe, Sarah, and Brian for your time and insights today. It was a great presentation with a lot of great information. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar today, and we hope you attend more Protiviti webinars in the future. Have a great day, everyone.